Welcome, everyone. Our topic today is how to access guidance. I'm Charleene Nicely and Executive Director and President of the Monroe Institute, and we have a really fun topic to talk about. But first, I'd like to share some recent news about the Monroe Institute. So after several months of hard work by our great team, we are happy to announce that we have launched our Expand app. So this is a meditation app that contains all of our new Monroe Sound Science technology. We have over 70 sessions in the app that will guide you on various topics. And in fact, one of the topics in the app is insight and intuition, which is what you would use for guidance, which is one of the topics we have today. And so there is a free session in there called The Gift, and that's a great way to start practicing accessing your own intuition. So look out for more information. We're going to have a live event with Paul, who is our Chief Technology Officer, and we're going to share with you a lot more about the app. And I'm so excited to share it with you. It's a wonderful app, really well done. And I'm biased, of course. But the second thing I'd like to share with you is also the reopening of our residential programs. It's going really well. We're reopening on August 7th, and our courses are filling up fast. And the first couple of 4 or 5 are already filled up as well. So looking forward to seeing you all there on campus soon. All right, so let's get to the topic on hand. I have 2 guests with me, Dr. Charleene Nicely and Mark Crewson. So Dr. Charleene Nicely is a clinical psychologist, as well as a trainer for the Guidelines course, and she's been training that course for many, many years, and is just an expert on this topic. And then Mark Crewson, who is a graduate of Guidelines, so he can share some of his experience with the course. But he is also a leader in the Council for the Local Chapters, which is where we have people practice local in their areas, Monroe Sound Science and sharing. And we'll talk some more about that later on. So welcome, Charleene, and welcome, Mark.
Thank you.
All right, good to see you guys. So I thought let's start off with sharing our personal experience with guidance. And maybe, Charleene, you could start us off.
Hi, Steve. I'd be glad to. Guidance is one of those things that originally I felt was just one of those special states that you get into when you're in a deep meditation. But what I've come to realize is that guidance is a part of your everyday, normal kind of state. Yeah, I'll get questions that I'm wanting some insight on, and I'll find that the answer might come on the radio in some music that I'm listening to. It might come in a conversation with somebody, or even overhearing somebody's conversation. And they never know they're part of my guidance team. But it comes a lot in just sense of internal nudges.
Right.
Through the experience with Monroe stuff and with the meditations, I find that I'm much more aware of that still small voice in the back of your head. And for me, a lot of times it's an intuition of, it seems like this would be fun, or I want to go down that road, even though it doesn't fit my usual route to where I'm going.
Right.
Yeah.
Good.
So,
thank you. All right.
lots of
Mark,
ways.
what's your experience with guidance?
I guess I would say for me, it was more about recognizing that guidance has been with me my whole life, and finally just listening. That's a really interesting aspect of it, because it's interesting to think that it's been with me my whole life, but I always thought, oh, that's just me. And yeah, it is just me, but it's almost that part of getting to know the parts of self. And one of the things that occurred to me this morning while I was actually in my daily session with guidance is sharing a little bit about understanding which voice you're listening to, because different people will have their understanding of guidance. And I find for me over the years, what's been most helpful is getting to know the various parts of self. So then I start to understand better which voice is my guidance. And I find that my guidance is infinitely patient, caring, just, I can't even explain how caring it is, and always there whenever I'm ready to listen. Sometimes I have periods where I kind of fight against it because I have other parts that want to go different places, but I always come back to center with my guidance, and it's this friend that doesn't judge. In a way, it's like the best friend you can have. So I'll just leave it at that. And there's a lot more we'll say, so I'll just go from there.
Good. Yeah, for me, really accessing guidance wasn't something I really thought about that much until I took the guidelines course. I tend to be a very independent person, so I'll figure it out. I'll know what to do. But when I took the guidelines course, all of a sudden I was receiving information that I knew was far greater than me. It was things I wouldn't have thought of. And like you said, Mark, it was caring, it was supportive. They cared about me. They were here to help me, not to give me all the answers, but more to guide me to find my own answers. And I, they vary from what parking lot should I go and pick to, hey, how does this whole universe work? How does quantum physics work? These are the kind of conversations I have with my guides. And it's fun because you sort of realize now there's so much more information. And taking the guidelines course really helped me to realize I just needed to ask. And then I need to put myself in a mental state to receive that information. Because as Charleene said, it's that quiet little voice. And now that I'm paying attention to it, it's not that it's louder, it's I'm focusing on it and I'm receiving that information. And I'll share one more recent story. So I was doing some more practicing with guidance, and a friend of mine mentioned, well, how about testing it? And I said, well, that's a great idea. So I did this meditation. I was getting some great information. And at the end of the meditation, I said to my guides, give me a sign that you're real, that this is absolute, without a doubt, when I see this sign, I will know that this guidance is real. So I left the meditation. I came out, I said to my wife, I had this wonderful session, and I'm going to be looking for this proof. And as I said that, I looked up and I looked out of our window onto our deck, and just beyond their deck, we have a tree, and there was this gray barred owl, and I took a picture of it just to show you. So this owl was right outside on our deck, and if you know these birds, they're very skittish, and it was staring directly at me. And I walked out on the deck with my camera, of course, to take a picture, and it just kept staring at me, and it stared at me for a whole hour, and I just sat on the deck and connected with this owl. And I thought, this is so bizarre. This has to be the sign, because there's no way that bird would let me get that close, because I was about 10 feet away and it wouldn't move. It just stared right at me for an hour. So that to me is just wonderful proof the guides are there. And I would encourage you to also test that. Find out if they're really there. Ask them for proof, because they are here to help us, and they will help you get that proof as well, if that's part of your process to learn to trust your guidance. So that's kind of my quick little personal story as well. All right, now let's go take a look at some of the questions out there. So one of the questions is, what are the different types of guidance out there? And Charleene, maybe you could help us with this one.
Okay. I wonder if maybe the source of the guidance stays the same, but my perception continues to change. I'll have guides that I see or interact with in the hemisync deeper states. Sometimes I'll see them. Sometimes we'll just have a symbolic conversation, the nonverbal communication. Often, if there's some humor or something that I did not put in, I didn't imagine it. Maybe I started imagining it, but then it continues in a way I didn't think about. I'll pay attention and go, okay, that's guidance coming through, giving me a message. But you can also get guidance by looking at your body knowledge, using kinesiology in different ways, pendulums, other toys that allow you to stop your mental analysis and figuring things out and open up to connection, to allowing the knowledge to come through. Automatic writing, very powerful for me. Whether I'm on a meditation exercise or I'm just sitting on my back deck, I can start writing to my guide, ask a question, and then just start writing whatever comes to my mind. And I find I get very profound information that way. So guidance is willing to be there and come through. We just have to be creative and get
Yeah,
our logical mind over to the side so that we're able to pay attention. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And Mark, how do you see the different types of guidance?
It's interesting you said that. A question, I saw a question pop up. Someone said, is it a discarnate being? And I would just say, yes, it's all of the above. Part of the magic of dealing with guidance is the exploration to find them. How do they speak to you? Which of your senses are they best attuned to come through? So sorry, trying to explain lots of different things at once.
That's okay.
I find sometimes they're verbal. I find the main thing I have to do is to get my logical mind to quiet down a little bit, which is why the Monroe process is so good about giving it, something to kind of take the logical mind and let it relax. Sometimes I put mine in a box and it goes to sleep and relaxes there. Or we sit all my parts of self around kind of in a circle to kind of sit and relax and we'll all meditate together. And then it opens and allows this energy to flow in. I've had guidance as a conduit for other types of consciousness. I've had contact with what I felt was an ET presence that was a very different type of energy from my normal guidance. So that's how I then got a sense that, wait, this is something else. I've had it just come in, and at times I've had the doubts, like everyone probably on the call has, where they've said, is this just me talking to myself? And at the end, I start thinking, yeah, but is the information good? Is it really good information? Is it useful? Is this something that made a difference in my life and helped me to make other people's lives better? Well, yes, there's the answer. And over time, it can develop. It can start with, yeah, I think this is probably more an aspect of myself. But if you get a really wise aspect of yourself and you start to develop that relationship and realize that's there, that can be a perfect gateway to get you better connected to the deeper parts that then get into whatever the greater guidance is, that is greater and beyond who you normally are as a human being.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and just to add what you're saying, I would also suggest being open to the guidance coming in ways you never thought of. And I'll give you an example. I remember when I was taking the guidelines course, and I'm an engineer, so I'm like, follow the instructions, you'll get there. And we were guided to do a session. So I was focusing on the session. I'm thinking, now I'm going to do this, now I'm going to do that. And I was hearing this music playing in the back of my mind. And I kept saying, go away, I'm focused on doing this. and I didn't get much out of that session, to be honest. And then I was speaking with the trainer, and they said, well, maybe find out what that is all about. And so the next time I went into the session, again, the music was there. And I went, oh, okay, let me go focus on that. And I did. And the song that was playing was a Beatles song, All You Need Is Love. And I was asking about how do we heal the world. And so, the guidance came as that song. And I went, oh, thank you. You just have to be open, and it comes in more ways than you might expect. And ever since then that I've listened to that, when I hear music in my mind as I'm doing meditation, I'll go and focus on it. And there are wisdom in those songs that I never thought of before. So I really highly recommend just being open to it and coming in different forms, not expecting that it's got to come this way. And your guides are very creative in how they will share with you the information you need. So, yeah, so that's some of that. Actually, maybe, Mark, we can touch on the topic you just brought up and start with you. There's a lot of questions around, how do I know this is real? How do I know that I'm just not making this up in my mind? What is your experience, taking the guidelines course and really understanding that this is coming from my guides?
I think perhaps one way to think of it is allow yourself to pretend at the beginning. Bruce Moen, who was a great friend of the Monroe Institute, had a suggestion for how you would connect with relatives who've passed on. And that was, you start having this conversation in your mind and you imagine it.
Right.
and you just fully invest emotionally in it. And at some point it starts to become real. But you have to spend, it's almost suspending that disbelief. So I think it's really about your relationship with your own mind first, and learning to allow yourself to just say, what if, what if this is real? Let's see where it goes. And that can be some of the biggest barrier to going, is that idea of, this just can't possibly real. It can't possibly, if you can move from that to maybe, we'll see, let's just see what happens. We'll kind of explore and play around with it. I think that's a key place to go on that journey.
And Charlene, as a trainer, what would you recommend to folks when they ask, how do I know this is real?
Well, first you look at, where did it come from? Sometimes you can go, I started out imagining, I love that idea, Mark, that you shared, of you start with this imagination, and then at some point things happen that you didn't intend. If I were going to imagine this conversation, he would not have had a top hat on, for example. That there would be things that you didn't put in, and you start to notice those. What I find too is that there's sometimes an inner sense that goes, this is not what I want, but it feels right. And so there's that sense that everything kind of clicked into place, and this is my good next step. I'd love to see the outcome, but I see the next step. It doesn't always feel comfortable. It doesn't always feel like, yes, I'm excited to do that.
Yeah.
But there's that rightness about it. And when my left brain is just too busy and too invested in the answer for me to really set it aside, that's when I will start looking at the automatic writing, or using a pendulum, or the kinesiology, what is yes, what is no, and use other body signals to figure it out. Or I'll talk to a friend. You can really get good information for somebody else, because your left brain, your analytical mind, is not as invested in the answer. And we do an exercise and guidelines where we get information for someone else. And it's amazing how, with not understanding what their question is, they haven't told you what it is yet. You can get information from them that is very meaningful to them, not to you, but to them, because you've put all of those expectations to the side. So that's another way when you just can't figure it out for yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, actually, Charlene, that's one of my favorite exercises, because it's astounding when, I won't get into the details, but I was partnered with someone, and she just puts out the question, and I just opened myself up to receive the information. I had my eyes closed, and I was just sharing all the imagery that I was getting and the feelings I was getting with her. And when I opened my eyes, she was crying, and I went, "Uh-oh, what did I say?" But the information was so profound to her and so relevant that it struck to her heart, and it was exactly what she was looking for. And I had no idea what the question was. I was simply sharing what was coming true. It blew me away. So yeah, it's amazing. The guides can come in many different forms. Even your friends will say something to you that you need to hear, and then you're talking to someone at a restaurant and they say it again. Pay attention. If it keeps coming up, then they are trying to help you in multiple different ways. So it can be very powerful. But yeah, Charlene, that exercise you mentioned is definitely one of my favorites. That just blew me away. What a powerful experience, because I had no idea what it was about.
One thing I love about that particular exercise in the guidelines program is people realize that, wait a minute, that sense of a color or of movement was guidance. It was useful information. It's not what I expected guidance to be. So a lot of it, like Mark said, it's learning how to pay attention and to recognize what we're getting. Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's one thing I did want to mention, if I can, very quickly, and that is some of this it feels like you're trying to get in tune with the rhythm of life.
Uh-huh.
Right.
And that I think is guidance is often helping me do that, because when Dr. Nicely said about, sorry, trying to align all the brain synapses together. Well, I think at times you get guidance that you're like, I don't really want to do that. I wanted to do this instead. But what I find is when you get in that rhythm and you accept and you follow along, it makes things much less painful in life.
Mm-hmm.
You're not, it's not like you're a surfer and you're banging against, or your ship banging against the waves. You get nicely in tune with those waves. And that's part of what I like doing with guidance, is saying, well, I guess this is what you have for us. I guess this is
Right.
what we will do. It's not really what I wanted. I've had different things in my life where I've said, I'm not ready to leave this. And like, well, I
Yeah.
think it's time, because you can either leave or we'll help you leave. And that's not very pleasant. So sometimes it's learning to accept. And as I said, it's that getting in the rhythm of life. And it's such a beautiful place when you actually can be there. It's not always without pain or something like that, but it can often take away the suffering, which I think
Yeah.
is so important. And for people who are having a tough time in life, finding some way to get in touch with your guidance so that it can help you understand, why is this happening? What is this doing in my life? What difference is this making? And how can I get the most out of this situation? So maybe if I'm in a sad situation or something that's not or that's painful, I will learn and get the growth that I've probably invited for myself via my guides. But there's more to that.
Makes
Yeah.
sense. Makes sense. Now, so some of the questions I'm seeing coming in are talking about, again, proof. How do I know I'm getting into these states where I'm actually accessing guidance? And it's actually one of the reasons why I took the guidelines course, is we have something there called a prep session, which is, a personal resource exploration program. And maybe Charleene, you could tell a little bit more about that. But I'll just quickly say what I liked about it. You get hooked up to these instruments and you get to see some data as to how you're physically doing to correspond with your experiences. But let me stop there. You can explain it better than I can, Charleene.
Yes, as part of the program, we do all of these exercises where you're on your own in your check unit, your controlled holistic environmental chamber, that special little womb that you have at Monroe. And you're following the instructions, but they're the instructions everybody is getting over the headphones. As a
Right.
special piece of the guidelines program, you get your own personal experience in the copper lined booth, where you're protected from any external distractions. And you get to talk with the monitor who goes through the experience with you, so to speak. You're alone in the check unit, but you have talked with them ahead of time about, this is what I really want to explore. I want to connect with my
Mhm.
guide. I want to know when I'm in focus 21 and I have that connection. I want to know, is my brain in that same state, where we see people go when they're having those connections. And you have the monitor who changes the signals along the way as the two of y'all work together. And then they are your left brain to go, oh, so you say you're in front of a door. Would you like to open that door and step
Mhm.
through? You feel a presence. Perhaps look to the right, and they remind you of what you wanted to do. So you have someone else being that analytical left brain, pay attention, so you can fully relax and engage with the experience. And they're changing the hemisync signals along the way so that you're getting your premium timing of that experience. It's really quite remarkable what people discover. Uh,
Ah,
yeah, and getting the feedback that yes, your body temperature was going up as you felt more relaxed helps to reinforce your own internal awareness of your process, so that it's not just a really cool 2-hour block of time, but you've learned something about yourself as well that can deepen your experience after Monroe. Because I want you to have a great time while you're there, but I really want your life to be improved by the time
Yeah.
that you've spent there. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's cool because it's kind of like the explorers that Bob Monroe were using, where, you know, he was interacting with those folks, and you're
Yes.
on a waterbed, you've got a crystal above you. And I'll share with you, I was so excited to do it. It took me a while to just relax and get into it. So it's probably best to just chill and go with it. But I was like, I'm in this cool booth. There's a microphone there. I can hear the guidance. I'm hooked up to all these sensors. And for people like me that like proof, I'm an engineer again. So it was great to see that data showing the differences as I was progressing. So yeah, that really stood out. That was just wonderful. Good. So another question is, you know, how do I know that this guidance is for my best, for the best purpose of my life? Or is it maybe a negative part out there that's trying to take me somewhere else? I know there's some concerns around that. You know, Charleene, how would you advise those folks on that?
Yeah. There are times when you go, this doesn't make logical sense. Or, yes, this is my strong guidance, but intuitively moving to Australia doesn't really flow for where I am in my life.
Right.
And so for those kinds of issues, I look for confirmation. You know, am I getting that same message in different ways? Did the book fall off and open to just the spot that I needed to see for that information? A lot of people say if I hear it 3 times, then I will explore it and see if indeed it's useful. And I go back to Mark's thing of, is it useful? Does it click in place? And then looking at the Tao, do the pieces of it start to flow and fall into place?
Right.
There have been times that I felt guided to move, and it didn't flow. It didn't flow. The pieces didn't come in, and I started looking at, well, let me look at this as a metaphor. If I were to move, what would be different in my life? What would that mean? And suddenly everything started to open up. And I didn't move physically, but I moved mentally and spiritually in a very different way, and brought in the qualities that I was looking for that physical move to create in my life. So if it just doesn't flow, or you have a strong gut sense that this is not right, keep working with it, because there may be a useful message there, but your interpretation of it was not quite on the mark.
Makes sense. Mark, how do you know that this is for your higher purpose?
It's interesting. I took a course this year that actually brought up a really good point, and that's because if you think about it, they're feelings related often. So, but whether it's fear or it's your intuition and guidance is part of what you're trying to determine. And one of the ways this course said you can think of that is, does it shrink your world? Does it kind of make you go in like this?
Right.
And if so, that might be more of the fear. Or is it something that opens possibilities, opens doors, and expands your world and makes the world a better place? And then my own take on some of that is learning to explore, where does that come from, and follow that energy to where its source. Is this a wounded part of yourself that is trying to get its own chance to say something? And that can actually lead to some really great inner conversations, because imagine you have your main part of self that you regularly identify with. Maybe this fear gets brought up, and you allow it to have a conversation with your guidance. So you get to almost be an intermediary between your different parts, and you can bring in deep healing that way. So it's not that I think a fear needs to be ignored and banished and thrown away. It's more like, ooh, who is that? And where does that come from? and how can I explore that? I mean, when I was younger, I remember having these terrified moments if I'd be in a building and there'd be a part that would say, I wonder what it would be like to kind of fall off the side of the building, and what would that feel like? And it would bring horrible terror. But then when I started to explore and say, well, wait, that's a part of me that probably would be great with doing out of body work, because then there's no risk there. And so it's just about understanding all the pieces and the parts in a way.
Yeah. And I'll make one more suggestion, which is actually to test it. So what I do is, if I'm not sure where that guidance is coming from, I'll ask, is this for my higher purpose? And I'll wait to see what I receive. And Charlene, you're kind of talking about where you feel it. So for me, when I receive it from a place of love, I feel an energy in my heart. And when it is coming from a place of maybe fear or doubt, I feel it in my stomach. And that's just over time, practicing and testing and going, where am I feeling this answer coming from? And I listen to my body to tell me that answer. And so when it's coming from the heart, when I know that that's where the energy is focused on in that answer, I tend to follow those. Now, I will say, though, there are times when the guidance can feel uncomfortable. And that's not a bad thing, because maybe they're helping you to take to the next level. And because you're expanding yourself, it might not feel comfortable. So in that discomfort, you can explore it and say, is this where I need to grow to next? And while that might feel uncomfortable, it's what you needed to do. So it's a practice. It's learning to just be more sensitive as to the signals you're getting. And over time, you develop that knowledge and know which one to go with. At least that's been my experience anyway. Would you agree, Charlene?
Absolutely. Just because you get afraid doesn't mean it's from a dark place. It might mean that it's from a place you haven't developed yet. Or it may be part of your shadow, as somebody commented down there. When you're asking, is it for my highest good? That's sometimes a difficult question. Is it for my highest soul purpose? Is it for my easiest life flow? Is it for my highest good so that I am integrating more of my parts, more of the pieces of who I am, looking at an inner family systems approach? Your highest good can have several different definitions. So sometimes looking at what is the question I'm asking can give you a lot of insight as to how to interpret the message that you got. Because, maybe I was thinking, how is it for my highest good for my earth family? And that's going to be a really different answer than, is it for my highest good on a soul level in terms of my next level of progression? Those two things usually will interact. The highest good is for the benefit of all involved, but the way you apply it may be very different. So.
Right, excellent. So another interesting question is, can our animal friends be our spirit guides or our guardians?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You may have a couple of animals that are active totems. They may change at different times in your life as you're dealing with different issues or at a different place in your own maturity. But I have one of my dogs who comes to me and is a reminder of being happy and free and in the moment and to just play with life. And I've had other dogs that are not spirit guides for me, so I'm not real sure how that gets decided. But yes, your animals very much can be guides and can remind you of attitudes and of creativity and of joy that you may want to intentionally bring into your earth life, your daily life. So yes, totem animals, clearly, not just from the shamanic traditions, but in any guidance situation, but also your own fur babies that you have interacted with in the physical world. Yeah.
I have a friend of mine, she has a horse farm, and her horses are her guides. They come to her in her dreams. You know, even when she's traveling, she connects with them, and they provide her guidance. And it's, I love what she said. It's a friendship between the two, and she has this way of connecting them physically, but then also spiritually she connects with them too. And so the range is boundless. It's just amazing.
Yes.
Good. All right. So another question that came up is they're wondering if we could share how we personally prepare and go about getting guidance. And maybe Mark, we could start with you.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. And what's interesting is since we just launched the app, I've been part of the beta testing for the app. And what I have found these days, I've used a variety of techniques, a variety of things, but essentially when I talk to guidance now, although I can do it whenever, but I like to listen to there's a 20-minute meditation with soundscape session that really I really like and align and resonate with. I just love the tones. I love how it makes me feel, and sometimes I'll do it 40 minutes, 60 minutes, just depends. But and I'll actually use the Muse app as well to measure into how deep state I get. And I've found, interestingly enough, as I get into that state, it's in a very calm place, which is not always the case during some of these meditations. But I will essentially start to listen to the app, and then I will feel a golden white light flow through my body. That was something I learned over a variety of years, but it really crystallized when I took Suzanne Giesman. So sorry. When I took her course at the Monroe Institute. And,
you're going to get a phone call from now on, Paul.
I know. I'm
going to call you.
But when I took her course and I listened to her exercises, and I would use that the white light flowing through me, and that just kind of settles everything down. And then I will deep breathe, and it just starts off with "Hello, Mark," or I'll say "Hello, Spirit," and we just have that conversation. You know, we just kind of go from there. But it's really just getting everything else kind of quiet down, so that I'm in a really calm state.
Makes sense. And Charlene, what's your practice for connecting with your guides?
It's very similar to that. What I do is I go to focus 10, so I'm calm and peaceful, but I'm alert. Then I expand to 12, because I find if I get centered, kind of lock into that, I'm calm, I'm centered, I'm present, and then I expand and connect more with my non-physical self and identify with that expansion. Then I can open up a window or a door or a telephone line. I can open up to that connection. But that series helps me because the getting centered, flowing in the light, feeling the light within you and allowing that to expand, allows my busy brain to calm down, and then from that calm space to expand, and then whatever I perceive is part of my answer. Okay, because that's the intention I've set up.
Right. Yeah, for me personal, all very similar. I actually have an air mattress that I use to get really nice and comfortable with a blanket, feel nice and warm, because to me, key to the process is getting very relaxed. And I tend to use Focus 2012, which is a free flow one. And it's one of those things that I'll mention to people that when you take the courses, there's a lot of guidance, but as you progress through the courses, there's less guidance and more what we call free flow, which allows you to just go where you want. And, I've been doing this for at least 20 years. So I actually prefer now more like our free flows, where I can take it where I need to go. It's kind of like, I don't need the training wheels anymore. But yeah, I do the same thing. I listen to our Monroe Sound Science. That helps me to get really relaxed and quiets that busy mind that I have, and I can put aside the world. And I have a name for my main guide. So I just call out that name in my mind. And when there's a connection, the best way to describe it, it's like a warmness comes over me. Whenever I make that connection with my guide, it just feels warm. And I think my physical interpretation of the energy connecting with me. And then, just as Mark said, it's just this wonderful conversation. It's like two friends sitting there having coffee together, and I'm putting out questions and I'm getting answers, and there's just this wonderful friendship and connection. So that's the way I normally do my guides. But I will say, and I think we've mentioned this before, sometimes other guides come that I've never encountered before. And I've had a guide too that was an ET that kind of looked like an octopus with these long gangly arms. But that was really interesting. And the energy was very different. It was almost like two different vibrations. But yeah, I normally start with that main guide, I guess you could call it. And he, she, it, whatever that is, will bring in other guides when needed. So, but I think the key though, and I think we all said that, is the practice, is you taking that time to sit down or lie down, however you do it, to focus and meditate. And when life gets busy for me and I don't do it, I feel like I lose a bit of that connection. And it's a reminder to me to go back and practice. So practice is really key. And, you know, we spend a lot of time showing you different techniques, but to make it work for yourself, practice is so important, really important. Yeah, good. All right. The other question, and maybe along that same lines, is there a particular guide that you use constantly, or does it change up? People are just trying to understand how it works. Charlene.
Yeah, I find that for myself and for a lot of other people, there's one main guide that seems to be with you all through your life, but that there are other guides that come and go depending on the kind of issue you're asking about or the time in your life.
Right.
There are, you know, if we look at guides as being people in our lives, mentors or friends and supporters, some of them are there from childhood all through our lives, and some of them are just there when we are needing a certain kind of instruction. And I think of my non-physical guides in a similar way.
Right.
So both. Yeah.
Okay, good. Mark, what are your thoughts?
I would hear a lot of people talk about the very personal guides they would have, and they would have, you know, it was John Smith, or it looks like Aunt Susie, or whoever it was, or they'd see a person in a certain set of outfits and so forth. And something struck me at one point that one of the guides to somebody said, oh, well, we choose the form based on what we think, you know, on what you need to see.
Mm-hmm.
And something hit me that I want to see who you really are. And so essentially what I have gotten since then is this, like, more like pure energy without the clothing, not because there's anything wrong with that, but because on some level, it's probably my snarky side. It's like, I don't want you to wear an outfit just because it'll make me feel better. Well, I want you to come as you are. And of course, maybe they feel more comfortable wearing clothing of some type. But I like to have just the pure energy. And so we interact that way. And even with names and so forth, we don't even tend to go there. And I have a feeling, because a lot of cases, I'm actually working with what I would conceive as higher self for me. But as you have said, sometimes something else comes in and other things. I did have a meditation once where I had a sense of this older Asian man sitting with me and talking to me about meditation. And so we just sat together. And it reminded me that I had done a past life regression where I had spent time in a monastery. And I was wondering, I wonder if that was related. But yeah, so I mean, it takes variety forms, but my main one is just the energy itself, and it just flows in. And I where I am now, I hear it kind of as a voice. And the more I embrace it and the more I relax and the more I connect with the energy, the deeper and more of it there is and the less of me there is, if that makes sense.
It does. All right, well, believe it or not, it's almost time. So I want to give you guys a chance to kind of give last minute advice. Why don't we start with you, Charlene, and then Mark, and I'll wrap it up after that.
Okay, well, we were talking about the guidelines program that's going to be in, I believe it's in August
coming.
28th to September
It's on the
3rd, I
website.
believe. I could be wrong on those
Yeah.
dates. But this program has been revamped and revised very recently, as you know, we keep updating all of the Monroe programs because that's what we do. But this one
Right.
has the new Monroe Science Signals that are very exquisite and powerful and hold you in the state, which I think is part of the magic of Monroe, is that you go to these states that you can reach in other meditative practices, but you get there easier and you can hold your awareness in those states. So I would encourage you to explore the Monroe Sound Science, either in an online program or in person or just in your own experiences, because it really does deepen, it adds booster rockets to your meditation practice.
Absolutely. Good.
Yes.
Thank you, Charleene. Mark, closing comments.
I will say, because we haven't talked about the local chapter network or what's potentially going to change into the chapter network, since that's a whole other discussion for another time. But my advice, in addition to everything else that we have already talked about, so everything that's been talked about, yes, but in addition is check out the local chapter network, check out the online chapters and things like that as a support network, because there's something about going to a program and you have that deep peak experience, but then there's the ongoing support that's really helpful to be able to talk to other people about your experiences and to get confirmation, not to have people tell you what your experience should be, but just if you say, was I crazy when I imagined this? Oh no, I did that as well. And here's something that happened with me later. Oh, really? I thought about that, but I wasn't sure. So it really helps to have a support network. And even if it's not Monroe, if it's other groups and other places, know that I think all of us are really here to try to help you connect with your guidance, because there's an incredible joy about seeing other people have those first time experiences where they finally get to say, oh, I finally connected and I finally know what it means. And that just brings incredible joy to my heart when we are able to share that with people. And it's not something you can make somebody else have. You can just allow and give space for that. So that's what we try to do in the chapter network, is give a lot of space and support for people to have these experiences and to continue to grow in them over time.
Right. Oh, thank you, Mark. Yeah, to carry on with what Mark was saying, I am also a huge fan of the local chapter network, and we started one here in our local area as well. Encourage you to go to the website. You can put in your location and you'll see what's close by. It's very informal. It's, fans of Monroe, graduates of Monroe getting together. And I should say, a lot of folks that have never experienced Monroe Institute also come. I would say about half of our group in our chapter are people that have never experienced Monroe, but it's just a great way to share and learn from each other. And I'm a big believer in doing group meditations, because I found when we do it as a group, it's so much more powerful. So all of that you get with the local chapter. Yeah, and then one other closing comment, which is, as Charleene said, we have improved the sound technology. And one of the things that we've done is we've introduced a bit more gamma, which is a certain sound wave that will keep you more alert. So it's helping people to not kind of fall asleep, because if you're taking the Monroe courses, that's something that happens quite often, is people get so relaxed that they fall asleep. So we're trying to ride that really fine line where you're so relaxed that you can let go, but still be very conscious and awake. And that's one of the improvements we've done with the sound technology, and we're seeing some great response. So let me thank Mark and Dr. Charleene Nicely very much for your time, your insights, and looking forward to seeing everyone on campus very soon. And thank you all. Be well. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.